Hi there, I'm Emily and welcome to HRD Live with our special guest today, Kim Arthurton. Hello, Kim.
Hi, Emily.
Today we'll be talking about building cross-functional collaboration to ensure agility within your business. Kim, can you tell us a fun fact about yourself?
Oh my goodness, we didn't prep a fun fact, Emily.
But throw it in there for good measure.
Throw it in there. It's part of my career history, but I'm a chartered occupational psychologist. So I won't analyse everything you say, I promise.
I'd probably quite like that, to be honest. That's a very serious fun fact.
It is quite a serious fun fact. There's lots of other fun facts, but I need to tell you after a glass of wine. So that's the most appropriate fun fact.
So, Kim, can you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Of course. So I am Chief People Officer at OVO Energy, and OVO is a green energy company founded in 2009 and still owned by the owner-founder. And OVO grew very rapidly, so we're now at 1 million customers, million energy company customers, and around about 1,600 employees. And I've been with the organisation since 2012 and helped to scale from about 50 employees to the 1,600. Wow. So it's been a really fun journey. And then I also wear another hat, which is the CEO and founder of a software company, which is a spin out from my time at OVO Energy.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So could you tell us a bit more about how you define the role of Chief People Officer?
Sure. So I think I love the title first and foremost. And I love the fact that so many organisations are moving away from the HR titles and more toward the talent and people titles, because I think that really indicates that organisations are waking up to the fact that people are a true asset. I think people have always said this. The CEO will always say, the people and the culture, it's our number one asset. But really, truly, people are starting to believe that. And I think the role of Chief People Officer is really there, not as, I guess, custodian of the culture. That probably sounds a little bit too ownership like. But in order to, I guess, hold the mirror up to the exec team, help to shape the culture and the behaviours, help to distribute that decision making, and help to facilitate the business to achieve its goals, essentially, via its people.
I think even by calling it Chief People Officer and moving, as you say, away from HR, it very much simplifies it, saying this is what we're about, this is what we do. We're the people.
Yes.
Could you talk us through why you sort of developed just three things? Because I imagine a lot of the challenges and the reasons why it came into what it is today, very much defines what it is, I guess.
Yeah, of course. So as we were growing OVO, we were recruiting like crazy and growing employee numbers, and we found that we were falling into many of the traps of perhaps a slightly larger business, in that we had lots of hierarchical functions. So we had like a marketing team and the HR team and et cetera, and these functions were becoming quite siloed and quite hierarchical, actually. So all of the things that gave us an advantage when we were a startup, so being very, very quick, being, I guess, agile with a small a, being very nimble, and we were losing some of those advantages through our people. And so I was looking for an alternative organisational structure and came across the Spotify model of organisational design. So essentially breaking the organisation down into cross-functional teams, which is who have everyone within that team needed to solve a particular problem. So to give you an example, at OVO, we would take customer payments, obviously, from our customers who are paying for gas and electricity. And previously in our kind of hierarchy, we might have a whole load of departments involved in the process of kind of generating a customer bill or how we're going to charge people, etc., etc. Everything from finance to what should the price be, all the way through to marketing, to what would the letter look like when you send out your bill. And that means that to make changes, it takes a long time, and there's not the innovation is lacking. And also that everyone in these different departments, they're not really focused on what the customer wants from their bill. Whereas if you put a cross-functional team together, really focused on billing, They can really get to know their customers' pain points, really understand their customers, and innovate and test and learn very, very quickly. So that's the kind of Spotify model of org design, although obviously Spotify are famous at doing that in their engineering and software teams. So I saw this, I thought great, went to visit a number of companies that operate in this way, and wanted to move OVO to that type of structure. And we started off with the product and tech teams, which for whom it's quite a natural way of working, and it worked brilliantly. And then we started to expand the way of working beyond those teams, and we fell into a lot of problems essentially. And when we thought about it, we realised we hadn't really thought through the organisational conditions we needed to balance out the need to empower these teams, i.e., we want to empower the billing team to know their customers, to test and learn, to experiment and innovate. So we want to empower the teams, but we also need them all aligned behind the strategy. Otherwise, we've got people kind of running off in all directions and duplication and so forth. And so essentially, I built Just Three Things to solve that problem. Right. So to get the balance between having, instead of having a big tanker, having like a little kind of a flotilla of tiny ships, all of whom can navigate the waves, so they're empowered to do so, but they still need to be pulling in the same direction. And essentially, Just Three Things is a goal-setting and alignment tool for use in this new cross-functional world. And it helps to everyone to be on the same page, everyone to understand what everyone else is doing. And it allows the functional and cross-functional hierarchies to sit very, very comfortably together so that we don't have to have this who's in which cross-functional team, what are they working on, how does it all stack up, that big confusion that a lot of companies have when they try and roll out this way of working.
And is this something that you always envisioned doing, or was it something that, because of these challenges you faced, you thought, I'm gonna build this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, truly, we didn't think about it at all.
Yeah.
In terms of being a business or a software platform. So we wanted OVO to be as effective as it could be. I am a very strong believer in OVO's vision and mission, and we wanted we wanted to increase employee satisfaction. We wanted to increase effectiveness and so forth. And so we very much built the platform to solve those specific problems. And then I actually entered Just Three Things into a CIPD award in 2017. And at that point, we'd probably been with OVO for maybe 18 months. And we started to save OVO lots of time and lots of money and so forth. So I entered it into this award. We didn't win. But the NHS won, so that was fine. I don't mind at all. But one of the judges was a chap called Perry Timms, and he called me afterwards and said, have you considered this as a standalone product? Because I work with a lot of clients who are trying to make the transition from more of a siloed hierarchy to an agile network of teams, and yet there's nothing on the market that supports that new way of working. And so essentially I reached out to my network, did lots of investigation, realised that he might be onto something, and then we spun out as a separate business earlier this year, funded by OVO's founder. So we're still part of the kind of family, but we are separate, completely separate from OVO for data security and GDPR and so forth. And now we are working with 18 clients globally, so it's very exciting.
You're such an entrepreneur.
I didn't set out to be, honestly. I'm not an entrepreneur at all, honestly.
You're what would you call it? An accidental entrepreneur.
I've got an amazing co-founder who's a lady called Erin Collier, and she's much more entrepreneurial. She's awesome. So I think without her, I would have struggled, but she's amazing.
Okay. So I suppose going back to the cross-functional collaboration within companies, like fundamentally, why do you think it's so important? And I guess, what do you think that means in layman terms? What does that look like?
Sure. So I think almost the thing that's important is organisational agility, and then I think that cross-functional teams is a way of helping to achieve that. So the reason I think, agility is a slightly misleading word because people think that you might mean agile with a big A, but if we take agile with a small a, so the ability to have quicker product iterations, to have a test and learn culture, to respond to client needs, I think that is a real burning platform. So for example, I was reading a recent survey just published yesterday, actually, by PA Consulting, and they surveyed 500 senior leaders, and out of that survey, the senior leaders were predicting that 1 in 6 businesses in their sector would fail in the next 5 years because they weren't able to keep up with a changing environment. So the need for change, I think, is super, super, super pressing. And then if you look at the kind of levers that we can pull as people professionals in order to help the organisation move from this kind of tanker that takes so long to respond to an organisation that's really focused on customer need, that's able to pivot much more quickly, then one of the levers that we can pull is to start to move from these kind of hierarchical silos where decision making has got to go up and then down and then along and then up and then down. It's decision by committee, and it takes a long time to get anything done. And also that the people in those silos can be so far from the customer and just not really understand what the customer needs. So those two that's the speed and the customer focus aren't really there. And so one of the levers we can pull is to put people together in smaller teams that are focused very specifically on one part of the customer journey, so one customer problem. And essentially, I mean, the structure, I think, is only one part. Of course, you need to think about culture and empowerment, and that's a much bigger topic. Yeah. But having the structure in place, I think, it's becoming a relatively accepted way of achieving more agility. So another survey, see if I can remember this one. Deloitte Human Capital survey for the last 3 years running have found this being the number one priority for HR and senior leaders. Yeah. And yet, whilst I think it was 86% said that this was their number one priority in last year, only 11% said they felt confident in how to do it. So there's a big gap between the real burning need for change, understanding this is a lever you can pull, but then a lack of confidence in terms of how to actually do that.
That's a big chunk in the middle. There's a lot of people that need to do things.
Yes.
Sorry, you talked about the whole hierarchy situation, the silos, which is something that I, speaking to lots of different HR professionals, I see come up time and time again. What I think I'm struggling to get my head around, and I love the concept of breaking down the hierarchies, but sorry, I'm going a bit off piece here.
No, do.
But how do you think that would look? And is that something you're a fan of? Do you think that could work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we say breaking down hierarchy, what we don't mean is kind of getting rid of. So we're not talking about kind of holocracy. So let's get rid of all managers, and so you still want to have career paths in place. You still want to have, I guess, a line manager that is there as the I was going to say custodian of a well-being, but that sounds like a parent. But
that's been the word of this podcast.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Custodian.
Yeah, custodian. So you still want a line manager who's there to be essentially look after and make sure that you're doing well at work, and that your needs are met, and your career's being managed, and all of those types of things. So you still want a line manager, but I think that the key difference is that you, instead of that line manager kind of setting your goals, you would take your goals from across the business, focused on the customer. So HR have actually been working in this way for so many years. So we're actually leading the pack. So a HRBP might report to the head of HR, but it's very unlikely, or they might get some of their goals, but they're actually really taking their agenda from their business, the organisation they're business partnered with. So the CEO might say, the strategy is X, Y, Z, and the BP would say, well, the people plan in order to support that strategy is Y, and it's very similar type of model. So I think it feels sometimes a little bit like Emperor's New Clothes, when actually what we're talking about is just trying to become have smaller units that are able to flex a little bit more, but most importantly are focused on customer need, and that's the key thing. Having little units that aren't focused on customer need won't necessarily get you a customer focused nimble business.
And we spoke about so you mentioned that Deloitte survey, where there's this big proportion of companies that are worried about it, but very few actually doing something. Touching on that, what do you think are the biggest struggles? What do you think they're really scared of, and how can we empower people to embrace this agility with a small a, and then to be cross-functional ultimately?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it's a very different way of working. So I think a lot of organisations are experimenting with this way of working in innovation hubs or kind of digital centres and so forth. So, for example, one of our clients, Just Three Things, Rollback of Scotland, has a digital kind of hub that is essentially working really effectively in this way of working. So a lot of companies are kind of experimenting. But I think in terms of moving things into the main organisation, I think a lot of it is actually let me go for two different sides.
Please do.
First of all, I think the processes of an organisation just aren't typically agile. So budgeting is a nightmare in most organisations. It's an annual budget. You have to put through a business case. You have to get sign off. You have to, and there's no room in that process for test and learn in most organisations. And I've met loads of companies that are looking at this in a different way. And there's a beyond budgeting movement, and there's lots of exciting stuff going on there. But the majority of companies still run an annual cycle. Yeah. And from a HR perspective, almost all of the processes are centred around the individual, not the team. So take one of my most hated processes, performance management, which I know everyone hates. But it's just so competitive. It's pitting one person against another on a distribution curve, even if you don't force it or whatever. And it's so individualistic. It's about shining yourself, and not about the collective efforts of the team and career progression. And I know, again, there's some amazing companies out there doing great stuff, but most companies, even if they have a specialist career path, they'll always have the leadership career path. And again, it's about competition. There's only one leadership role, so therefore we're all going for it. And all of the processes are set up around fostering individual contribution in a way that's very planned and an annual cycle. And I think we need to think about how we break those down if we want to truly move the company to this agile world. Because what I'm seeing with our clients is that you start off with a small pocket and it works really well, and then all of a sudden you get this clash with the rest of the company that just aren't working in this way. So that's one bit. And then the second element, I think, is culture. So to have a truly nimble organisation that is fostering innovation, I think that the culture needs to be truly empowering and really, really forgiving of failure, encouraging of test and learn. And that just isn't the majority of cultures out there. So, and that can be, I think that's probably a bigger barrier. The process stuff we could probably work out, but the cultural change obviously takes longer and is more of a challenge.
No, you're right. Actually, well, obviously you're right about everything. No. But no, you're right about that whole juxtaposition of the team / the individual. And I think definitely now the way we are encouraged to work, HR are sort of very much weaved through everything in a company, but yet everyone's been ultimately pitted against each other, but we're told to be a team and do all this and be agile and work in a way that then completely is contradicting what actually you're being measured on. So I think it's really, really good. You've just kind of outlined it really, so that's great.
And the goals in that type of scenario, your goals are essentially not customer goals. So you might have, let's take a HR example, let's take our BP example earlier. So in a kind of forward-thinking BP environment, you'd probably have that BP taking all of their goals from their client group. So we want to, essentially their goals will be, I need to support this strategy. But what often happens is HR also say, but we've got this central program, like L&D program, that we want to roll out across the business. So therefore, you've got these two almost competing goals. And if you put that into a customer scenario, you might have, let's say, a software engineer working in a product team, and so they're working in the billing team. And where they should be taking their goals from is their product manager. They don't report to them, but their product manager is the person that's closest to the customer, really understands the customer's pain points. And if they say, we need to change the way that this bill is laid out because our customers don't understand it, that should be the thing that we're doing. What we shouldn't be doing is taking our goals from the head of software engineering, who might say, I don't know, I want to increase test coverage across the whole business. So the way that goal cascades happen in businesses is also contributing to this this pull between working kind of really cross-functionally versus kind of working functionally. And until that's one of the problems that Just Three Things is there to address. But until organisations can let go of the line manager setting the goals, they'll always have that tension.
And do you think that's a generational thing? Do you think in time that's going to that's going to dramatically change?
I think what's really interesting is if you look at the, I guess the psychology and the makeup of the younger generations, and also those of us that are getting older and remaining in work for longer, they're very, very similar. And these groups are really valuing kind of flexibility. They're valuing developing skills, not careers, belief in a purpose, smaller teamwork, all of those things. And so therefore, this kind of cross-functional agile structure really, really plays to that new workforce, because you can slot in kind of a freelance or flexible workforce much more easily into this type of structure than you could into more of a hierarchy.
So in terms of this new way of working, we've touched upon parts of this, so sorry if I make you repeat yourself a bit, but I just want to get an overall picture. How can HR really, really support it?
Sure. So I think there's so much that HR can do. So, for example, I ran with Perry, the chap I mentioned earlier, ran a kind of Agile 101 workshop recently. And I think actually we're doing a same one at the HRD Summit.
Oh,
and I think we had about 150 people there, but it was oversubscribed hugely. HR want to find out about this stuff. So I think first and foremost, we probably just need to network more. And to go and speak to companies. There's companies that are doing amazing things in this space. And actually, once you actually start looking at how to do it, it's not scary. It's not as scary as people thought. So I think the first thing we can do is get out there and read more and do more. And then the second, I think we just need to really think through how we set up any future processes.
Yeah.
So as we said, focusing on the team rather than on the individual, encouraging collaboration, encouraging self-managed careers rather than centralised, all of that. Anything we can do to distribute decision making, which HR, to be fair, has been doing for a long time, so continuing that trend, and empowering our people. Again, HR want to do these things, it's just continuing that trend.
And getting that buy-in, isn't it?
Yeah.
You said that a lot of companies are doing this well. Can you cite any of them at all as a mini case study?
That's a great question. So I'm just trying to think of people that I could name versus people that I've read about.
Yep.
So of course, most of the tech companies are set up in this way, but it almost kind of goes without saying. But I think a lot of more traditional businesses might say, that was okay for Spotify because they were kind of founded in this way, whereas I work for a more traditional company. One of the most well-known case studies of a more traditional company moving in this way, but I don't know much about it apart from having read it, is ING Bank, who transformed with McKinsey, and they went lock stock. So the whole bank is now working in the cross-functional teams, not just product and tech, everybody, finance, HR, etc. From our clients, so we work with the NHS, so Guy and St Thomas's NHS Trust, and they are doing a great job actually starting in their HR team, which is amazing, with a really forward-thinking Deputy Director of Workforce Planning, who's just said, actually, there's so much we can do in this kind of cross-functional space. So I think they're really brave in that type of traditional company to have a go at doing this. RBS, I mentioned earlier, again, probably a little bit more at scale. They're doing a great job. So there's lots of pockets of really fantastic innovation out there.
Fab. And if there's one thing that you could really pinpoint and say, this needs to change and this is how I want it to change, what would that be?
What a good question. I think given that this is this podcast is, or we are talking about HR, I think it would be HR's confidence or self-image to really understand and own some of this stuff. Because I think sometimes we think as HR professionals, this belongs to the tech teams. This is the CTO. This is what those kind of trendy people in Spotify and Monzo do. This isn't kind of HR. We're more or even people or talent function. So I think I think if you ask me from an organisational perspective, I think companies need to become more nimble and faster to respond. But I think from a HR perspective, we need to become more confident in which levers we can pull to achieve that.
Thank you so much for your time today, Kim. That's been brilliant. Please do remember to tune into our weekly podcast, HRD Live, on Spotify, SoundCloud and iTunes. Until next time, I've been Emily Sexton Brown. Thank you so much. Bye.